Dorothy Latigue. She's also Kei'Mani's legal guardian. She said she came home from work Tuesday morning, found Kei'Mani was missing.
Kei'Mani's family came out of town to search for her. Now they say they're planning a funeral instead.
You didn't have to do this to a child. There was nothing that Kei'Mani would have done to make you hurt her. Kei'Mani was phenomenal. Kei'Mani was a helper. Like, she was older than what she appeared to be. Like, you know how they say somebody has an old soul? She was that. She loved older music. She loved playing video games. She loved the friends and family that she was allowed to be around. She played basketball for Spring Elementary. She was highly intelligent.
The unlocked door was the first clue that something wasn't quite right. When sharing her side of the mystery that unfolded on March 17, 2025, Dorothy Latigue recalls the suspicion stacking up as she returned home from work that Monday morning. Despite being her 13-year-old granddaughter's legal guardian, things like unlocked doors weren't typical for the household. Dorothy had described her granddaughter, Kei'Mani Latigue, as being a phenomenal, responsible, highly intelligent old soul who was happy to help those around her. Trusted with her own house key, Kei'Mani wasn't the type to forget to lock the door on her way out. As Dorothy walked into her house, which was in a state of complete disarray, the distinct smell of gas further fueled her confusion. The stove had been left on. Kei'Mani's keys and glasses had been left behind. Dorothy couldn't ignore the increasingly concerning warning signs. Kei'Mani wasn't able to see without those glasses. She just wouldn't simply forget to wear them. Dorothy called Spring Elementary School, where Kei'Mani was supposed to be attending class, to check in on her granddaughter. And that's when Dorothy learned that Kei'Mani hadn't made it to school that day. Kei'Mani was never the type of kid who would run away. Quite the opposite, actually. Dorothy could always count on her to call and ask for permission before going anywhere. But this time, calls to Kei'Mani's phone went straight to voicemail. Considering the upcoming award ceremony and basketball-themed birthday party planned that would reunite her with all of her cousins, Kei'Mani had a lot to look forward to. But talk of fun parties and ceremonies were soon pushed to the side as a much grimmer reality set in. Instead of coming together to celebrate Kei'Mani's bright future, her loved ones began the search to find the missing teenager. Hey, Crime Salad listeners. This is Crime Salad, and my name's Ashley. And if you're new here, welcome. Be sure to subscribe. In this episode, it will be just me this week as Ricky is away for work. I will be sharing what we've learned about Kei'Mani Latigue's story, tackling questions that only get increasingly complicated. As more information and interviews with members of Kei'Mani's family are released, we'll explore the possibility that earlier intervention could have saved the beloved teenager from a horrible tragedy that devastated the whole community as we ask the ever-important question, is there anything more concerned citizens can do to help prevent vulnerable children from falling victim to tragically similar fates? Is reporting abuse and trusting the authorities to take care of it enough? The topic of abuse, especially when it comes to children, is never an easy one to get into. But with an estimated 1,990 children having died from abuse and neglect in the United States in 2022 alone, we feel that it's an extremely important issue to cover. With this morbid number on the rise in recent years, we must do what we can do to continue to demand real changes. That being said, we must warn you that this episode does include discussions of child abuse, dismemberment, sexual assault, and death, all relating to children. We will provide a second warning before we share the most gruesome details of this case. If any of these topics are sensitive for you, you may want to skip this episode entirely and tune in next week instead. For now, let's turn our attention back to Kei'Mani's story. Though investigators have yet to release all the details about Kei'Mani's case to the public, through interviews, Kei'Mani's grandmother has given us some insight into Kei'Mani's upbringing. Dorothy has shared that Kei'Mani was placed in the care of her mother's godmother, Dorothy's best friend, when she was only 9 months old. Dorothy claims that Kei'Mani's mother, Tierra Caston, has never really had custody of her daughter. She explained that Kei'Mani's living situation changed about 5.5 years ago when she went to go live with her grandmother. About a year before the Latigue family's lives were completely upended by Kei'Mani's disappearance, Dorothy was granted legal guardianship of her granddaughter, Kei'Mani Latigue. Despite life's challenges, Kei'Mani remained a bright light for those around her. When describing her granddaughter, Dorothy recalled Kei'Mani's soft spot for children, her passion for basketball, impressive intelligence, and her love for her family. Kei'Mani remained under her grandmother's care right up until that cursed day in March, when a monster hiding in plain sight would reveal its true sadistic nature. By March 18th of 2025, Kei'Mani was reported missing. Search efforts began right away as strangers and loved ones alike came together to look for the missing teenager. Kei'Mani's family didn't hesitate to spread the word, sharing their concerns with the public as the search continued. Tierra Caston was among those who spoke with reporters early on about the search for her missing daughter and how it had affected her, saying, quote, "I have never had a seizure before in my life, and I've had 3 within the past couple of days. If my baby doesn't make it home, I will never be okay again. I've legitimately been on social media since the minute I found out, spreading awareness, sending out flyers, contact information, anything to get my baby home. I have not slept in 3 days. I have not eaten in 3 days." During another interview, Tierra told a reporter that the last time she saw Kei'Mani was on March 15th, 2025, stating, quote, "I seen her on the 15th. Her dad brought her down to my house. Apparently, my mother gave him permission, and honestly, it was just me loving on my kid," unquote. Darnell Jones, who came forward as Kei'Mani's father, also spoke to a reporter about Kei'Mani's disappearance as the search continued. Darnell said that Kei'Mani had reached out to him late on the night of March 16th because she thought someone was trying to break into the house. He claimed that he went over to the house with his cousin and stayed there for over an hour trying to ease Kei'Mani's fears of being home alone. And he said that they left around 12:30-ish. This made Darnell the last person to see Kei'Mani before she disappeared, something that wouldn't escape the investigators' notice. Unfortunately, after almost a week of community-wide efforts to find Kei'Mani, on March 24th, 2025, the search came to an end at a deserted, safety hazard, mostly burnt-down house that sat waiting for demolition on Miami Street in Toledo, Ohio. Hidden among the rubble, investigators found a dead body. It wasn't long after news broke out about the discovery of human remains that the Latigue family's worst fears became a heartbreaking reality. The body was identified to be that of 13-year-old Kei'Mani Latigue. There, in that abandoned shell of a home in Toledo, Ohio, Kei'Mani Latigue was pronounced dead on March 24th, 2025 at 12:19 p.m. Sadly, Kei'Mani will remain forever 13. Her life tragically cut short in the most awful way. But this isn't the end of her story. The discovery of Kei'Mani's body set off a powerful call for justice, launching a hunt for answers that would expose dark secrets and stir up questions about Kei'Mani's family. On March 25th, 2025, the Lucas County Coroner's Office performed an autopsy on the young girl's body. That same day, the coroner released a report ruling Kei'Mani's death a homicide caused by multiple incised wounds of the neck. And as I mentioned at the beginning of this episode, here's your warning, because we're about to briefly cover the more horrific details of the brutal reality of this case. So if you think this description will be too much for you, tune back in a few seconds, skip forward to the aftermath of the tragic discovery. Brian Steele, a lieutenant with the Columbus Police Department spoke to a reporter about the case, sharing a detailed overview of Kei'Mani's injuries. Steele stated, quote, "This case is one of the most horrific cases I ever heard."
This case is one of the most horrific cases I ever heard. This is a 14-year-old that was murdered, raped, had her hands cut off, and her throat almost cut off. This is an absolute animal that came into our town. I understand some of your editors won't let you print the word animal or view the word animal. If people are more offended to how I'm describing him, how he treated that girl, that's on them, not on me. Again, I'm glad our officers are okay. Our SWAT are the best of the best. We just send a message. You murder somebody, do not come to this town. I'll answer any questions.
So at this point, I imagine an intense sense of fear lurked in the shadows of the community as they mourned Kei'Mani's tragic death, while knowing that the killer responsible could very well be living among them, concealed by a carefully constructed mask. But the citizens of Toledo wouldn't have to worry about Kei'Mani's killer posing a threat to the rest of society for long. The investigators in charge of tracking down her killer had already narrowed down their focus on their prime suspect. Even though Kei'Mani had only been missing for about a week at that point, there didn't seem to be any question of who was responsible for her murder. The day that the autopsy results were released, 33-year-old Darnell Jones was charged with murder, felonious assault, and abduction in connection with the murder of Kei'Mani Latigue. A SWAT team in Columbus, Ohio, tracked Darnell down on March 25th, quickly closing in on their suspect. But apparently, Darnell wasn't ready to give up quite yet. According to Brian Steele, Darnell pulled a gun on an officer as the SWAT team was closing in on him. Thankfully, the officer was quicker. Darnell was shot while everyone on the SWAT team made it out unharmed. The Columbus SWAT team successfully apprehended Darnell on March 25, 2025. Darnell was brought to the hospital to be treated for the gunshot wound and stabilized. Having survived the arrest, Darnell will be forced to face the consequences of his dark, repulsive, utterly evil actions, allegedly. Since the case is so recent, Darnell hasn't been convicted of any charges related to Kei'Mani's death yet. Investigators still haven't shared many details about the evidence that led to Darnell's arrest. However, we do know that he is believed to be the last person to have seen Kei'Mani and has allegedly given inconsistent statements regarding the case. Phone and surveillance video footage also gave weight to the charges. We assume there will be much more to come of this case in the weeks and months that follow the haunting discovery of Kei'Mani's remains. What poor Kei'Mani went through is absolutely heartbreaking. A bright young girl who will forever be known for her kindness deserves nothing but love and peace. As information is slowly shared with the public through carefully controlled press releases, confusion and lingering questions about how this could have happened remain. Officials have stated that more details will be released when it no longer risks jeopardizing the investigation or future court proceedings. In the meantime, several members of Kei'Mani's family have continued to share their perspective on the case and Kei'Mani's life leading up to her death. While filling in some of the gaps with new information in some ways, those interviews have also added to the confusion. I imagine that the truth lies somewhere in the tangle, but it's too early to know with complete certainty exactly who to trust yet. Public opinion seems to be rather mixed, with some picking sides and others writing off the whole family altogether as a toxic mess. For now, we'll go over a few of the major points of contention within the fractured family dynamic, hopefully starting with a discussion that will develop as more information is released and new voices join the conversation. As we mentioned earlier, Kei'Mani's mother has shared her concerns, emotional turmoil, and love for Kei'Mani ever since her daughter went missing. However, during an interview with WTOL 11 News, Kei'Mani's aunt and Tira's sister claimed that Tira didn't have anything to do with Kei'Mani during the last few years of her life. She even went so far as to question why Tiara had bothered to come back around now when she was never there for her daughter before.
For her mother to come down and have all this to say and all that, Tiara, where was you for the past 4 years? We haven't seen you since Kei'Mani TikTok party. You haven't called her. You haven't sent her anything. You haven't said, oh, baby, I'm going to come get you for a weekend. We haven't seen you until this happened. Why we got to see you when it's a tragic moment? So, Tiara, where do you stand? She'll call my mom. She'll go through me and say, have you talked to mommy? And I'm like, no, about what? And she'll say, oh, well, she got custody of Kei'Mani and she trying to get child support from me. So it wasn't that Tiara was concerned about Kei'Mani. It was more of the why she want child support from me.
If my baby is in that house and my baby is deceased, I cannot wait to see it's done.
This clash between Tiara and her sister, Ann Dorothy, seems to have taken on a life of its own, fueled by rumors, cruel comments, speculations, and opposing perspectives. It resulted in a recent court case over who would be granted the rights to Kei'Mani's funeral planning and estate. Dorothy was ultimately granted permission to follow through with her plans of organizing the 2 funerals, one that will be open to the public and a separate private ceremony. And as I listened to the footage of the hearing, one aspect in particular stood out to me. During the proceedings, Dorothy stated that Tiara hadn't visited since Kei'Mani's 11th birthday in 2022. And Tiara seemed to confirm this, claiming that the last time she was permitted to see Kei'Mani was on her 11th birthday. Regardless of the reasons for Tiara's absence from her daughter's life, this contradicts Tiara's earlier claims that Dorothy allowed Darnell to bring Kei'Mani to visit her on March 16th, 2025. And that's by far not the only interview that has stirred up questions either. So after countless headlines announced the revolting revelation that Kei'Mani's father was accused of murdering her, Dorothy told a reporter that Darnell Jones isn't actually Kei'Mani's biological father. She explained that she accepted him as a father figure for Kei'Mani because she thought he had changed, left his life of crime behind him to become a better man. Now, she admits to feeling betrayed after hearing what Darnell has been accused of.
This man has been to my house several times. He usually takes her for weekends to his house to visit with him and his other children. And I feel deceived. Like, you played for so long in my face like you was her dad, like you really had her best interests at heart. But where is she?
At this point, it's unclear who's telling the truth. In a press conference held on Tuesday, April 8th, the executive director of Lucas County Children's Services, Randall Muth, stated that LCCS does not have any records identifying Kei'Mani's biological father. He explained that genetic testing ruled out someone who was alleged to be Kei'Mani's father back in 2011, and paternity for Kei'Mani has never been established. Regardless of the inconsistencies, the truth remains that Kei'Mani's loved ones were devastated by her loss. The whole community has come together to share their heartbreak, anger, and demands for justice. When asked if there's anything the community can do to help prevent tragedies like this in the future, Toledo Police Chief replied, quote, "No matter how many hours we spend in the neighborhood, there's things that we will never hear or never see that other community members or family members are seeing. If you ever have any doubt that some child is being abused or something is just not right, then by all means notify us or notify CSB and get the authorities involved early before it gets to this point. Because unfortunately, with this case, especially once we were involved, it was already too late for us," unquote. This is a bold statement which warrants a closer look. Could Kei'Mani Latigue have been saved if those around her had simply reached out to authorities and reported their suspicions of an unsafe home environment? Given this comment, this can't really be another case where multiple reports of suspected abuse were ignored, right? From the beginning, people have questioned the role Child Protective Services may have played in Kei'Mani's death, just like we've seen in far too many other child abuse cases we've covered. Kayleen Harabidian, Kei'Mani's 6th grade teacher, is one of the many voices calling out CPS as she grieves the loss of her former student, describing Kei'Mani as a sweet girl in an interview with 13 Action News. Kayleen recalls, "She greeted me every single morning with a hug. That was all she ever truly wanted, was affection." Now, sadly, back in 2024, when Kayleen was still Kei'Mani's teacher, there were signs that Kei'Mani's home life wasn't quite as cheerful as the upbeat teenager's personality might suggest. Kayleen recalls that Kei'Mani told her about some of the disturbing things that were happening in her home, admissions that concerned Kayleen. Leaving no room for doubt, visible injuries on Kei'Mani's body were physical proof that backed up Kei'Mani's story. After hearing about Kei'Mani's home life, Kayleen did the right thing, what we are all told to do when we see those warning signs. She reached out to Children's Services to report her suspicions. Kayleen went on to say that she wasn't the only one who reached out to authorities about their worries over Kei'Mani's well-being, alleging, quote, "Kei'Mani expressed some things to us in the school, not only to myself, but to other adults in the building, her peers, her school bus driver, who all made phone calls to Child Protective Services." Lucas County Children's Services was notified on several different occasions that she may be at risk of child abuse in the home, and it just fell on deaf ears. "Our calls were not heard. Her voice was not heard," unquote. But this case is cloaked with complicated layers. Lucas County Children's Services, or LCCS, has admitted to 3 reports accusing Dorothy of excessive disciplining regarding Kei'Mani, 1 on December 8, 2023, and 2 on March 21, 2024. However, none of these reports included allegations against Darnell Jones. In fact, it seems that Darnell wasn't on LCCS's radar at all. According to LCCS, not only was Darnell never named as Kei'Mani's abuser, but he was never identified as an adult who was involved in Kei'Mani's life in any capacity, let alone as her father. Even during LCCS's most recent conversations with Kei'Mani and Dorothy, Darnell was never mentioned. Oblivious to Darnell's presence in Kei'Mani's life and the risks his criminal record may have warned them off, officials never questioned him. However, they did speak with Dorothy after receiving the reports, and during the press conference on Tuesday, Randall Muth insisted that LCCS responded to the allegations with thorough investigations that included speaking directly with the people who made the reports, inspecting the home, private conversations with Kei'Mani, and reaching out to those who knew the family, among other measures, to get a comprehensive idea of what was going on. They also discussed appropriate discipline with Dorothy and referred the family to supportive services. And Dorothy shared her perspective on these investigations in an interview with WTOL 11, claiming that she learned from these visits and now she knew what was legal and what wasn't. Dorothy talked about using corporal punishment against Kei'Mani, insisting, in her own words, that she was not abused.
Okay, abuse in whose eyes? Because she was not abused. Yes, she was chastised whenever she was wrong or did things wrong. Other than that, she was not abused. She was not just whooped for no reason or just because I felt like it. I've went through this twice because the school system had contacted CSB on her behalf when she went to Bennett Academy. And they came in, they did a case study and closed it. They've stated there's a way to chastise children without physically harming them, and you need to whoop them on their behind, nowhere else. So, okay, with that in mind, I knew that. So she didn't have like bruises all over.
When questioned about this during the press conference, Muth said, quote, "Lucas County Children's Services does not endorse or recommend the use of any corporal punishment. However, Ohio law does state that it is a decision that is reserved to the parents. And if parents decide in using their exclusive judgment to use corporal punishment, we do provide guidance on how to do that, unquote. So later discussing the general guidelines for deciding if a child should be removed from their home following an investigation, Muth explained that if they believe a child is in imminent risk of physical harm, LCCS will respond in one of two ways. If they believe that the family can and will work with them to ensure the safety of the child, then LCCS will go to court. Ultimately, they determined that it was best for Kei'Mani to remain under her grandmother's care and referred to the family to supportive services. Despite claims that many people reported suspicions of abuse on behalf of Kei'Mani, Muth insisted that the 3 reports mentioned are the only ones LCCS has on record, confirming that they did receive a report from Kei'Mani Harabidian, and he encouraged anyone who believes they contacted LCCS about their concerns for Kei'Mani to call the center's hotline so that they can investigate the matter further. The fact that LCCS was involved at all has led many people to question if Kei'Mani might still be alive if they had done more to protect her, criticizing for not removing Kei'Mani from her grandmother's home. On one hand, the reports weren't specifically about Darnell, and some people believe that Dorothy genuinely loves her granddaughter, and she did her best to provide her with a good life and has been unfairly targeted. Still, others argue that though Dorothy may not have murdered Kei'Mani, that doesn't mean that she didn't abuse her granddaughter. She has admitted to using corporal punishment after all. How far does Dorothy's punishments go? Added to that is the fact that Dorothy allowed Darnell to be a part of Kei'Mani's life, despite being aware of his criminal record, which includes charges of arson, domestic violence, and assault, among many other serious offenses. Is it possible that Kei'Mani might have lived long enough to celebrate her 14th birthday if she had been removed from her grandmother's care? Regardless, it seems that people are getting increasingly frustrated with CPS's excuses. After all, Kei'Mani's case is far from the only one that has exposed failures of a system that was supposed to protect children who are powerless to save themselves. Following Kei'Mani's death, Toledo City Council members discussed the very issue, with the councilman George Saranto questioning the actions agencies take after receiving reports of abuse. He explained, quote, "I guess the question for me is, this is not the first time this has happened. A teacher reports physical abuse of a young person, and what happens? Nothing happens. Teachers are very, very good sources of information. I like to know what happened because now we have a real tragedy. She's gone," unquote. Despite the county's recent efforts to put together a task force to improve LCCS, with Commissioner Pete Gherkin sharing his goal of rebuilding trust between the community and Children's Services, the public is demanding more from services that have continued to fail at fulfilling their duty to protect victims of abuse. On March 28, 2025, the day that Kei'Mani should have been celebrating her 14th birthday, protesters marched outside of the Lucas County Children's Services building, demanding accountability, reform, and changes that will prevent these types of tragedies from happening time and time again. Amanda Schaefer, one of the many protesters who refused to be silenced by empty promises, shared a message I suspect many of us can relate to, stating, quote, "I'm tired of the violence. I'm tired of losing kids." There have been far too many cases of children left to suffer at the hands of their abuser, even after suspicions of abuse have been reported to Child Protective Services. Maybe some of you are even facing the struggle in your own life, concerned about a child you know, yet left feeling hopeless and helpless as the authorities refuse to take meaningful steps to protect victims of abuse. We're always told, if you see something, say something. But it can be disheartening to hear all of the times people speak up to save a child only to be ignored. Of course, that doesn't mean that we should just give up on helping children escape abusive situations. If you suspect that a child is being abused or neglected, you should file a report with the proper authorities. Child Help Hotline is a great place to start by calling or texting 800-422-4453 or using the live chat feature on the Child Help Hotline website. You will be connected to a counselor who can help guide you in the right direction, and we also can't ignore the sad fact that sometimes reporting suspicions of abuse to authorities just isn't enough. Child Protective Service agencies in the United States received over 4 million reports of child maltreatment during 2022, cases that involved 7.5 million children. However, only around 3 million of those children received prevention and post-response services. That same year, 1,990 children reportedly died from abuse and neglect in the United States, with an estimated 50 to 60% of maltreatment facilities not recorded on death certificates. That number could sadly be even higher. A report published by UNICEF in 2003 highlights the need and possibility of making the world safer for children by creating a scale that ranked rates of child maltreatment deaths in industrialized countries. Spain, Greece, Italy, and Ireland were recognized for the lowest rates of maltreatment deaths, at 0.1 to 0.2 deaths per 100,000 children. At the other end of the scale, the United States and Mexico were found to have the highest rates, 2.2 deaths per 100,000 children. Demanding changes, advocating for better protection for children, and spreading awareness are all important steps towards preventing needless deaths. If you find yourself in the position of recognizing that a child may be being abused, try to gather concrete evidence to support your claim if possible. After filing a report, check in with authorities that you reached out to. Ask additional information that might be helpful. Investigations into cases of child abuse do take time, but if it becomes clear that your concerns are being ignored by staff at your local agency, you can always take things a step further by asking whether the agency has an appeal process or by reaching out to a children's ombudsman. They advocate for the child's best interests and work to ensure their rights are respected. And if your appeal is out of the question and you are unable to get the help you need from a children's ombudsman, then it might be time to contact your state's designated state liaison officer for child abuse and neglect. Tasked with ensuring that agencies abide by state laws and policies, state liaison officers can serve as a powerful line of defense for vulnerable children after all other options have failed them. If you do need to escalate things to this level, you can find the contact information for your state's state liaison officer at the Child Welfare Information Gateway website, along with a whole database of important information regarding child welfare and state-specific numbers to call to report child abuse and neglect. Justice for Children, a national child advocacy organization founded by Randy Burton, is another great resource that works with adults to protect abused and neglected children who have been failed by a fatally flawed system, offering support and guidance through complicated legal processes, connecting those in need with referrals and legal resources, and pairing research with education to inform concerned citizens are just a few of the ways that Justice for Children steps in to address the often dangerously inadequate services provided by CPS. Randy, a former chief prosecutor, shares his perspective on the ways the legal system fails vulnerable children on the Justice for Children website, stating, quote, "These preventable child deaths are not merely the result of incompetency or excessive caseloads, but rather the direct and predictable consequences of a social service delivery system that places a higher priority on preservation of the family unit and rehabilitation of the offender than on protection of the child. Only in instances of crimes against children does our law enforcement establishment allow CPS, a social service agency, lacking law enforcement training, experience, and prioritizes to receive the initial report of abuse to perform the initial civil investigation of the crime and dictate the progress of the criminal case. Only in cases child abuse is a victim forced by the state to live in the same home with his or her abuser. Unfortunately, it's too late to save young Kei'Mani, but that doesn't mean she has been forgotten. Investigators have turned their focus towards getting justice for the beloved teenager. Meanwhile, the community has come together to honor Kei'Mani Latigue in many different ways, ensuring that she will forever be remembered. Several GoFundMe pages have been set up under Kei'Mani's name, claiming to be raising funds for the family, her burial, memorials, and legal funding, among other things. Kei'Mani's aunt has spoken up against these GoFundMe fundraisers, explaining that the funeral home has already offered to cover all of Kei'Mani's burial expenses, so she doesn't see what else they would need the money for. She also explained what the family needs most right now is moral support, insisting that the immediate family will take care of laying Kei'Mani to rest, and all that comes with it. They'd prefer for people to stop using Kei'Mani's name in unapproved GoFundMe fundraisers, let the family bury Kei'Mani in peace, and continue to offer support through this incredibly difficult time. On March 28th, in honor of Kei'Mani's birthday, the Toledo Buffalo Soldiers stepped up to offer their support, along with free lunch and cake to Kei'Mani's classmates at Spring Elementary. Toledo Buffalo Soldier Fred Lefevre shared his perspective on the issues children currently face, explaining, quote, "These kids are dealing with stuff, nightly shootings, gunshots, parents arguing, custody battles, things that we never had to deal with or talk about. So it's very stressful for them. This is just a little bit of a break," unquote. Though the soldiers have visited the school before to teach lessons on gun safety and anti-bullying, on the day that Kei'Mani should have been celebrating her 14th birthday, they simply offered support and a steady shoulder to cry on as the children mourned. With Kei'Mani Latigue's death being so recent, there are sure to be updates on the horizon. We'll keep an eye out for any new information as law enforcement pursues justice for Kei'Mani and all those who loved her, now forced to mourn the bright light that went dark far too soon. For now, we'd love to hear your opinion on the case and the topics we've covered today. Should CPS have removed Kei'Mani from her grandmother's care? Would that have been enough to save her? And what do you think could be done to improve the systems set in place to protect vulnerable children? How can we save victims of abuse before it's too late? Please share today's episode on social media and leave a comment to continue this important discussion. As always, we are so grateful for our Crime Salad Patreon and Apple subscribers. Your support means the world to us, and it helps us play our part in spreading awareness about these important topics. And thank you so much for listening to this week's episode. We are so honored to be given the chance to share this heartbreaking story and other stories with an audience who cares so much about the victims just as much as we do our best to lend our voice to those who have been unfairly silenced. Please stay safe, take care of yourselves, and we'll catch you next week for another deep dive into the stories that need to be told.